Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here with Consolidated Planning Group. And I've got here with me today, Lindsay Asawa, and we are going to be talking about a different topic today. Oftentimes we're talking about all kinds of planning topics, more on the financial side and how basically not to mess up, state and federally funded benefits and things like that, a variety of topics. But today we are going to be talking about the other side of transition, mentally and emotionally preparing for transition. So Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs planning firm. If you've joined us before for our Lunch and Learn series webinars, we're glad that you're back. If you're here with us for the first time, we're glad you're here as well. So a couple of housekeeping items. Your videos and your audio are muted. We can't see you and we can't hear you, but we do know you're there, and your questions are important to us today. So as Lindsay is speaking today, if you have questions, put them in your chat box. In the chat box, I'm going to read them out to Lindsay, and we're going to answer just as many questions as we can. We are going from 12 to 1 today. We'll be done by 1. All of my contact information is in the chat box. We do have a YouTube channel where our webinars are posted. You can subscribe free to the YouTube channel and kind of peruse what's out there. There's over 100 webinars out there on various topics regarding special needs, so they may be helpful to you in your journey. And today's meeting is being recorded, and later today, by just simply being registered for this webinar, you will get a copy of today's slides as well as the recording. So I have a little bit of history with Lindsay here. So Lindsay and I don't even know how many years ago. It was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I'm not sure. Lindsay and I partnered together in Fort Bend County, and we basically formed the Fort Bend County chapter for the ADHD support group, which is called ADA, ADDA. I don't know, is ADA or ADDA? We don't know which it's called, but anyway, it's a support group for parents with kids that have ADD, ADHD, what have you. And so we formed that group, just a kind of a spinoff of the mothership parent group in Houston. And so that's how we came together. But Lindsay is a licensed clinical psychologist, and she has been a wealth of information to our ADHD parents, and she is loved by everyone, and she just brings a lot of experience and knowledge to the table. And like me, we are both professionals working in the community, but we are also parents to kids that learn differently and have some special needs as well. So we get it from both sides. So Lindsay, it's certainly my pleasure to be back with you today, and I'm going to turn everything over to you.
Thank you, Allison. I think there's one other. Did you want to mention anything about this slide?
No, we're okay. Let's dig right in,
Okay,
and
let's dig right in.
Anything at the end that we need to chat about, we'll chat about that.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. So as Allison said, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I have a practice in Missouri City called Missouri City Family Counseling. I'm a co-owner of our practice, and we have about 8 of us now, 8 clinicians that are providing therapy for children, teens, adults, couples, families. We do kind of a little bit of everything. I'm actually the testing coordinator for our practice, and so I oversee all of our evaluations. And so we do psychological and educational evaluations. And then we also offer other resources at times, just for you to be aware of. We do offer groups from time to time, and for children, focusing on social skills and coping skills. And then we also offer teen girl and teen boy groups. And we offer just occasional workshops and parent training opportunities. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll show my contact information at the end, but if you have any questions or you need anything or you need ideas or referrals, that's part of what I do, is just try to figure out how to direct families towards what might be most helpful for them. So today I'm talking about mentally and emotionally preparing for change, and specifically trying to launch children who have special needs. So intellectual delays, developmental delays, learning differences, really just kids who have special needs, but also I want to mention that these slides and this information really applies to all of our kids when we're thinking about trying to mentally and emotionally prepare them for change. So there's several things that I wanted to go through that as a psychologist, these are kind of, to me, the most important ways that we can think ahead and start planning for our children transitioning into adulthood and trying to help encourage them to be more independent and prepare them for the future. So to me, that it kind of starts with the foundation is making sure that you are prioritizing mental and emotional health at home, because they need a foundation in this in order to be able to be mentally and emotionally prepared to be independent and to be, going out into the world, doing whatever they are going to do. So the way that you can do this at home, no matter what age your child is right now, I feel like these are the things you can be doing right now at home every day. And we don't see enough of this really with families. And so incorporating emotions just into daily conversations. There's a lot of families I've worked with who just don't really talk about emotions. It's just not something that's brought up. And I really encourage you to intentionally try to make that part of the conversation. So when you're having a discussion, bring up feelings words and ask your child or your teen, how did they feel about that? How was their day? And try to encourage them to focus on those emotions. And there's a lot of tools that can help you with that. There's lots of books and there's visual charts with feelings faces to help, especially our kids with special needs have a harder time identifying their emotions. So that's something that you really need to be doing now. And also kind of prioritizing mental health that we prioritize physical health. So we're always thinking about whether our kids are physically healthy, if they need their doctor's appointments, if they need to take their vitamins and their medications, but we really need to also be thinking about their emotional health. And especially right now, during the past 2 years of the pandemic, we in the mental health field have just seen an explosion of anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide attempts, and suicidal ideation. It's just been a huge problem. And so I think now more than ever, all of us need to start taking this more seriously and making this a major priority for us too, as parents. I think it's something else to think about. And really be watching, especially as your child is getting closer to this point of transition, make sure you're watching for signs of emotional concerns, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, or any other mental health related concerns. I think it's important to take those seriously and to seek out help as soon as you can, even if it's just getting a second opinion and finding out, is this something I should be concerned about or not? Is this just normal developmental phase that my child is going through? So part of that is also for yourself, acknowledging your emotions and seeking out support for you as well. But just keep in mind that therapy is always an option. And I really feel like in our field, that is an area that we help with all the time is the transitions, those major life transitions. We are there as a support system for parents and for kids. And so it's just having someone else that you're checking in with, talking about how you're coping with that transition, how your child is coping, how to prepare them. So therapy can be a great option, but I did want to just tag on to that right now, many clinics, including ours, are very full. Lots of therapists have wait lists because the mental health field has just been bombarded. And so because of that, we have a lot of parents that are coming to us in crisis, but we can't get them in quickly. And so what I want to just mention to all of you is, if you think that this will be a helpful thing for you or your child, go ahead and look into it now and go ahead and get on wait list now, because it's something that I think you need to be thinking ahead. We're not in the state right now where you can get immediate urgent treatment very easily. So I'm just kind of giving you all a heads up about that.
Lindsay,
Okay.
thanks for saying that, because that is truly an ongoing issue that we're definitely hearing about every single week. So, and my question is if they're on these wait lists and they can't get help, should they look for help online, or do you have any other suggestions that way?
So there's certainly, telehealth has also exploded during this time, and there are a lot of options for meeting virtually, doing virtual sessions, and especially some teens and young adults can do really well with that. Younger kids don't tend to do as well, but that is certainly an option. I do think for a lot of our kids with special needs, they tend to do better face-to-face. So if you are able to find the face-to-face options, I think that's definitely going to be a better route for a lot of these kids. But as far as other options go, I mean, I would say it also depends on the level of severity. So if you're at a point where things are more severe and urgent, there are other options than just doing, weekly outpatient sessions. And there are programs that are more intensive. There are intensive outpatient programs where kids will meet a few times a week. There are partial hospitalization programs where they go back home, but they also spend a lot of time at receiving treatment. And then there are fully inpatient programs. And so if you're in a more urgent situation, you have really serious concerns about their mental health needs, then those options are available. And typically you can get in faster because they're intended to be more urgent care. It's just a little bit harder to get in for those outpatient weekly appointments with therapists in the community. So those are the ones that you may need to get on a wait list for.
Lindsay, we've also seen, and I want to know if you have any updates for this, because I've actually seen some posts on this more recently, where there was a crisis, there was an inpatient stay in a mental health place, right? And then they're released, and they're released with 7 days of medication. They don't have a mental health professional. There's nobody that can see them within 7 days. What does a family do in something like that? I mean, I've literally seen that as an ongoing issue these last couple of months.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing many times, and I think that's another reason for planning ahead. So if you are looking to admit your child to one of those more intensive care programs, I would say as a parent, start actively seeking out aftercare. Look right away, start looking into options that they could transition to after they are released from the program. And that includes a psychiatrist to monitor their medication, as well as a therapist. So you guys as parents can actively work on that. But I think another option is always, the pediatrician, and making sure that they are continuing to monitor, get some appointments set up with them, because they can oversee some of those or monitor those medications, at least for some period of time while you're waiting to get in with a psychiatrist. There are a lot of psychiatrists in the community and private practice, but many of them also do have wait lists at the moment, especially the ones who accept insurance. Another thing I would consider is going out of network with insurance, because you are going to be able to get in faster, get appointments sooner if it's out of network with insurance. And so if that's something you're able to do, then I would consider that, at least for the short term, so that you can get treatment as quickly as you can, as quickly as you need to. Okay, so the second big thing I wanted to talk about is coping skills, because when you are preparing your child emotionally to transition into adulthood, we want them to launch from us and have these tools in place. And we want them to be able to cope with all the challenges that life is going to continue to bring. And we can't expect that at that point, they are going to be able to learn and develop those skills, because, at that point, it's going to be an uphill battle. So I would say, again, start now, no matter what age your child is. These are things that you need to be doing at home right now, working with them on some healthy coping skills. And there's a few ways to do that. One way is modeling it for them. And we don't usually think about that as parents. We think about the teaching part, but we also need to be modeling good coping skills for our kids. And one way to do that is literally pointing it out when you are using one of those skills. So saying to your kids, okay, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I need to take a break and go somewhere quiet. And I need a few minutes, and I will come back once I've calmed myself down and I'm ready to talk to you. So you're literally explaining to them what you're doing and how you're coping. And that is one of the best ways that they can learn. So I really encourage you to do that whenever you can. But also, of course, teaching them some coping strategies. And One way that I think can be helpful is by building this into just everyday routine, so it becomes habits. It becomes good habits for them. So, some families get in the routine of starting the day with some yoga or meditation or mindfulness practice. And I think that's such a great idea, and it sets the stage for the rest of the day. It becomes a really good habit that hopefully your child will carry over with them into adulthood. For our special needs kids, I also really recommend using visuals as much as you can, rather than just verbal reminders. So hang up signs, use pictures, use social stories, so that you're really, you're pairing that visual cue with the verbal reminders as well. And I think that can be more effective for them. I listed some examples there at the bottom of just some different healthy ideas for coping strategies, and you have to kind of figure out what works for your child, and it might be different for each of your kids and for you. What works for one person doesn't work for someone else. So oftentimes our kids tend to get overstimulated, and we need to kind of point that out and help them become aware when that's happening. And sometimes we even use a number scale, and we teach them on a scale of 0 to 10, where am I at right now? Am I at a 10? Am I at a 7? And when they reach a certain point, they need to have some strategies and some tools that they know how to use. So these are some of the ideas that you can practice with them and work on with them and see what works and what you may want to continue. And with kids who have special needs, I would say that repetition and practice is extremely important, because doing it one time is just not going to work. It's got to be every single day. Give them the same reminders every time. The more repetitive it is, the more that you're actually building those connections in the brain, those pathways, so it becomes automatic. It just becomes an automatic response for them. So this is another really helpful way to prepare them. And then all of this also kind of relates to the idea of building self-awareness in our kids and helping them understand themselves better and what they need. So I think one way to do that, or a big way to start, is for parents to first understand and accept their kids for who they are. Because that's where, once we have done that as parents, then we can really help our child to understand themselves better. And one way that we need to do that is by really keeping an open mind, talking to them, really listening to them, observing and watching how they interact, how they respond to problems, what they're good at, what they struggle with, and then also gather feedback from people who are with them often. So their therapists, their teachers, their coaches, talk with them about how they're doing, how they're handling things. What are they great at? What are they struggling with? So the idea is that we start to identify their strengths and their weaknesses, and then we can help them to identify those things as well in themselves. So we're kind of shifting that self-awareness to them as they get older, which sets the stage for that transition when they're on their own. And I put a picture here of this self-awareness worksheet that you can find on a website called understood.com. I think it's understood.org actually. And what I would suggest is you can use a tool like this to sit down with them and really actually start identifying what do they think are their biggest strengths and weaknesses, and what are some of their favorite things, what are things they don't really like to do, just to help them start to think about some of this. And then you guys can build on that and continue learning more about them and what their strengths and their goals are. And then use all of this information actually to kind of help them set some short-term and long-term goals. I think that's the idea behind becoming more self-aware, because then we can really set up some goals that are realistic and start working towards those goals. I also listed on here, identify the lagging skills and help them keep practicing those skills. And there's a psychologist named Ross Green. I didn't put this on the slide, but his name is Ross Green, and he has a website called livesinthebalance.org. And on there, he has an actual assessment, like a questionnaire that helps to identify those lagging skills. So you can go on there, you can use that questionnaire, and you and your team can try to figure out what are some of those lagging skills. It might be things you haven't even thought of, but they might be some skills that they are behind in that they need to continue working on. So it helps you just to narrow down, what do we need to work on?
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of prioritize. And then
Lindsay,
yes.
Lindsay, I wanted to chime in here. One of the things that I was able to do with my kids, you know, a lot of our families that we serve, their kids have disabilities, there are frequent doctor's appointments, specialist visits, things like that. And as parents, we're always talking for them, you know,
Yes.
we're rambling off whatever their diagnosis history is and what their meds are and what the issues are or whatever. And so I started doing kind of a little role play in the car with my kids and saying, okay, so I'm the doctor, I'm walking in, they're meeting you for the first time. What do you say? You know,
Yes.
they're asking, because I wanted it to get to a point where they felt comfortable. They're not always like, well, Mom, speak. You know,
Right.
I wanted them to do that. And I said, listen, I'll help you. Tell me what you would say. So what is your history? Why are you here today? What,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's going on? And are there anything special about you that they need to know? Are there any allergies, like that kind of thing? And so that way, it was just building those skills, because we're not
Right.
always going to be there. And so just basically saying, hey, look, I'll help you if you get stuck, but you can do this. You don't need me to do this. You can totally do this. And so,
Yes.
and each time we did that, and we did it a little bit better each time. And I'm not needed on that kind of stuff anymore. So, and I think that that's important, because as a mom, sometimes, maybe it's just me, but from a helicopter perspective, you know, we've got this long list of questions and all the stuff that we want to share. And so that was an important thing for them to learn.
Yes, it builds their confidence. It reduces their anxiety and your anxiety. So it does kind of help emotionally get them ready to be more independent. And that's, yeah, so you're speaking of more about self-advocacy, which you have to have this self-awareness in order to get to that point of being your own advocate. And I do have another
Sure.
slide about that as well. So absolutely, that's one of the big steps towards preparing your child to become more independent. And this last item, looking for the best fit, I talk to families about this all the time. So once you really understand your child and their brain, how their brain works, what their learning style is, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and after you've kind of also helped them understand those things about themselves, then together you can start to figure out what are the best fit environments for them. So rather than trying to push them to fit into an environment that is not a good fit for them, and we can anticipate that that's going to create a lot of additional challenges that they don't need, then instead we can look for environments that are a better fit. And that's thinking about schools, thinking about extracurricular activities, thinking about a future jobs, even just part-time jobs, but looking for environments that are a good fit, knowing who they are and how their brain works. I think that's really important, because that kind of sets them up for success. And we want them to have some successes, especially early on, so they can build their confidence and feel less anxious about that transition. And so you can do some of that before they're transitioning, you know, while they're still at home and while they're still young, start looking for those best fit environments and making sure that you're setting them up for success. Another one is just establishing some good habits early on, because what we have found is that if you can do this now, then the transition is much easier, because they are prepared. They already have a routine. They already have these habits that they've developed that you don't have to remind them about anymore. And they can then carry those on with them without you having to be there to remind them and constantly support them. So start early on this, and then do it over and over. You know, make these things that you just give them reminders about every day, things that are built into their routine, because it has to become a habit in order for it to really kind of carry over and stick. And it really does build their confidence. When kids start to see that I can do this myself without being reminded, then it's kind of, it adds a little boost to their confidence and helps them to feel like they're starting to master these skills and they're starting to be more independent, which is important for their overall level of anxiety as well when they're transitioning. So when you're thinking about their daily routine right now, just think about what you're including in that, and think towards the future. Think about what are some skills that I could include right now in their daily routine that start to build those good habits and set the stage for the future. So have like maybe building some self-care activities into their daily routine, building work into their daily routine, even if they don't have a part-time job, or even if they don't have any homework, they need to kind of get in the routine of having some sort of responsibilities and work time that they're doing every day, just to kind of prepare them for the future. Chores can be part of that. And then also build in social interactions into their daily routine, because that's another big one that seems to drop off when kids do transition, especially our special needs kids have a tough time after transitioning away from home with keeping up social interactions. And so if it's just something that's part of their routine, something they get lots of practice at, then it's going to be an easier transition for them and smoother. I also just listed organization and time management on here because those are two of the biggest issues that we see with a lot of kids that we work with as far as developing good habits. And so there's things you can do right now to get them in some good organizational habits and time management habits. And then hopefully they will carry those over. So like having a place where everything belongs, using labels for things, color coding things, using pictures, like I said, keeping things visual, and that can help them learn how to keep things organized. And then with time management, using tools like timers, smartwatches, calendars, things again that are very visual, but things that they can continue to use as they get older. I mentioned the visual timers. I think they're really, really helpful, especially for kids with special needs and developmental delays. They really have trouble with that understanding of time passing and time awareness. And so we like to use these visual timers that actually show the time passing. I have one here, I'll show you real quick. And when you turn these, it actually turns red. The color changes so they can see the red shrinking, and then they know that time is up or time's going to be up soon. So it's a more powerful way to use those timers. And we just keep them in several places around the house and around our office because they're very, very useful in teaching those time management skills. Okay, so this is what, Allison, you were referring to, the self-advocacy skills, which is a really huge critical step towards getting them ready for the future. And I think a lot of times we just don't think about this until it's time for them to be ready to be their own self-advocates. And the problem is at that point, they just haven't had any practice or any exposure to it. So it's harder to learn it at that point. So again, this is something you can kind of start early. First, it starts with us being the advocate for our kids, but anytime you can start gradually transferring over those responsibilities to them. And just like Allison was saying, just giving them those occasional opportunities that they speak up rather than you, and giving them the words to use. So like you were saying, Allison, practicing using role playing with them and actually literally giving them specific words and phrases or questions they can ask. A lot of kids need to also learn how to explain their own unique differences. So, if they have an intellectual disability, if they have ADHD, they have autism, these are things that when they are independent, you are not there to speak for them. They need to know how to communicate some of these things to others so that they can move through the world without as many, conflicts and challenges. So give them some words and phrases and help them practice using that to communicate to others, because it's not going to be instinctive to them. They're not going to be able to come up with this on their own. It's something we actively have to work on. And then also, anytime you have transition meetings, make sure that as they're getting older, make sure to involve them as much as you can, either in the actual meetings or discussing it before and after with them, getting their input on what they think might be helpful as far as accommodations go and modifications. They just need to be involved in this as much as possible so that they can start that process of advocating and speaking for themselves. Were you going to say something, Allison?
Yeah, Lindsay, I was going to say there's really opportunities all day, every day to include them. I mean, it's even little things. If you're out to dinner, not ordering for them, what are you going to order? Like, kind of having them get it together before the waitress comes or whatever. There's so many opportunities all day long that as a parent, if you're really trying to be intentional on giving some of this over to them. It's all over the place every single day. And
Yes.
so, and that was it was something, a journey that I took, that you don't even realize. I think as, you're a parent for so long and you don't even realize like some of the stuff that we're not helping them.
Right.
We think we're helping, but we're not necessarily helping them by handling those things. So sure, I think this is a great one.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I think it's something that it's like we need constant reminders ourselves to be doing this, because I think as parents, we kind of get in the habit of doing things for them, and we have to remind ourselves every day, okay, don't do it all for them, let them do it. And this helps practice social skills as well, by the way. So I think about my youngest son was extremely shy and had a hard time when we would walk into the daycare every day and they greeted him. He never wanted to greet them back. And so we started practicing it in the car. We would say, okay, here's what you need to say. When they say this to you, I want you to practice saying this back. And we would role play it. And then we would go inside and I would stop with him and say, okay, it's your turn. What are you going to say? And sometimes we had to stand there and wait for a few minutes until he was ready, but it was really good practice. And I think about also with my oldest son, he wanted to put some books on hold at the library. And it was just one of those little opportunities that I just said, okay, what do you need to do? How are you going to do that? And he had to think through, okay, I need to locate the books online and I need to call the library. I need to ask them to put it on hold. And it terrified him. The whole experience was terrifying, but he did it. He made it through that process and he felt really good. He felt very grown up about that. So just those little things, I think, start to make a big difference and it starts to build their confidence. Okay, so this is one that I think a lot of parents, we do a lot of planning, but then we are not quite ready for those bumps that come in the road. And when that happens, either we or our kids may kind of spiral and just feel like, oh, this is terrible. This has gone horribly. And I think it's better to just expect those setbacks from the beginning. It's going to happen. There's going to be setbacks and challenges. We can't avoid that at all. It's going to happen. So what you can do is set your kids up and yourself with a different perspective on it, with a growth mindset perspective. If you guys have heard about that phrase of basically looking at any mistakes or quote failures as actual opportunities for growth, because that's really what they are, where you learn from each of those mistakes and we are able to try something different next time. And so I think a really powerful way to do this is you can actually point out those opportunities when you see them, or point out those experiences and examples when you see them happen. So using words like, I noticed that you, or I like how you did this. So we're kind of standing back and we're just pointing it out to them. But what that does is it makes them stop and think and recognize their own behavior and how they handled something. And it kind of highlights it for them in their brain, and they file that away as, oh, that was a time that I actually, I learned something and I did well and I handled that well. So I think that is really powerful. Even when we're doing therapy with kids, that's one of the most powerful ways that we can make change in therapy, is by pointing out the times that the client handled something in a really positive way, and we highlight that for them. So really just think about just taking a step back, take note of what's happening, and try to stand back as much as you can when those setbacks are happening and let them handle it. And if you need to step back in, then that's okay. Step back in and you can kind of coach them through it. But if you can be as hands-off as possible and let them learn from those things, I think that's incredibly powerful, and it helps with the growth over time. Then another thing we work on with clients all the time is just problem solving, because they need to have problem solving skills in order to become more independent. So one way to do that is we kind of act as a coach for them as they're learning these skills. So when they run into a problem, again, we kind of stand back, but we ask them questions to guide them through it, to act as that coach. And we can do it by using examples, not just real life examples, but we can come up with examples and we can practice it that way, just with really simple examples at home. So telling them, okay, let's pretend like you have run into this problem. How would you handle it? What are some choices you have? And which one do you think might be the best one to try, just to practice that skill of problem solving. But then when you see them actually running into the problems in reality, then that's the time to kind of step back, but act as the coach and guide them through it. Part of that is also teaching them how to use assertive communication. So, and this is also part of the self-advocacy, learning to speak up for themselves and talking about, well, what could you say to that other person? And if they can't think of anything, then we may have to give them the words, but we're teaching them to speak up and use assertive communication skills, not aggressive, but still assertive, and letting others know what they don't like and what they would like for them to do differently. That's part of the problem solving process. And then I just listed some of the questions there that you guys can ask as the coach when you're guiding them through it. You can ask them, what's the problem? Just because they need to identify the problem in order to come up with some solutions. And then ask, what are some choices? And let them come up with the choices. Some kids have such a hard time with this, and they just cannot think of any ideas. And so we can always give them one here and there, kind of start them off, but really try to wait and let them think through it and come up with ideas on their own, because they can do it. And then ask them to identify which of those choices seems like the best one to try first. And then ask, how did it go? And get them to tell you, well, this didn't go well, but this thing went well. And then what would you do differently next time? That's an important part, is, what did you learn from this, or what would you try next time? Another thing that we have found is that, kids need to have some, what we call them, well, there's a psychologist that uses the term, and now I use it all the time, islands of competence. So some things in their life, little islands that they feel competent, they feel like they are good at this, they enjoy this. So this might be a sport, or it might be art, it might be just any kind of activity that they tend to enjoy and gravitate to, and they have a talent in that area. That is just as important as all these other skills that we've been talking about, because they need that. It's kind of something that it boosts their mood, their self-esteem. It keeps them motivated to keep working towards their goals. And so to me, keeping those things and helping those to continue throughout the transition time is extremely important, because it not only does those other things, but it also gives them a sense of stability, because they have this one thing that they get to hold on to. Even when so many other things are changing in their life, they're going to continue this activity that really brings them joy. So try to figure out what that is for your child, and really encourage it and support it, and find ways that can continue as they're transitioning. So if they're going to be living somewhere else, or they're going to be at a college campus or a community college, or wherever they might be, look for opportunities there for them to continue those positive interests and hobbies that they have. It might be organizations or classes that you can sign them up for. There's even online communities for a lot of different hobbies and activities. So make sure that they've got that in their life and that it continues, because it's just a critical thing for emotionally, or I guess for supporting their positive mental health and emotional health. And then this is just kind of something that needs to be there, that we don't always think about, which is having the resources, the mental health resources. So not just the health resources, not just making sure they have doctor's appointments set up, medications, everything they need to maintain their health, but we need to also think about their mental health and what resources do they need. And so you might need to kind of research what are some of the local resources, especially as kids are getting older and transitioning into adulthood, because those resources change, and the things that you relied on previously may no longer be options for them. And this is a time that self-advocacy comes in. They need to do it with you. They need to be part of that research so that they can also help identify, options that would be helpful for them. You can even make a list of some different agencies or services that they could reach out to, and encourage them to make the phone calls and reach out. So if they're going to be going to a campus, a college campus or community college campus, then visit the counseling center and find out what resources they have available. A lot of them have really great resources that you can take advantage of that are oftentimes free. And then also locate the disability services and I would really encourage you to even identify places that have good disability services before you even make your decisions as far as where they're going to be, because that can really kind of make or break the whole experience. If they have a good disability services department and you're able to set up some helpful accommodations, then I think that that's one of those things that can really set them up for success and give them the support that they need to do well in whatever program that they are going into. And then, like I said earlier, just having one of the big transition problems that we see is kids kind of losing that social piece and not having as many social connections after they transition into adulthood. And so this is something we need to think about in advance and kind of prepare for. And again, try to set up some things that might be helpful. So if they, for example, if they're not going to be living in the home at some point, then I think that you need to maintain that, they need to maintain that connection with you and with the family. And it can be very, very comforting to have something in place, some structure in place, especially for our special needs kids that kind of need that structure, having daily check-in phone calls or weekly check-ins, and having some like weekly dinners on the same day every week with family, and having a calendar where you can put that information on the calendar so they know it's coming. It just provides that sense of stability and comfort for them when all these other things are changing, then they still have that link to family and to home. I also think it's helpful for us to actively work on building a support system for them wherever they're going to be. Even if they're still going to be at home, making sure that they have that support system outside of just family, making sure that they maintain some friendships that they may have had in high school or earlier years. Find ways that they can maintain that. Make sure you get contact information from those friends and plan get-togethers with them. Try to maintain that link with those friends because that's really important. You can also identify people who can act as mentors to them in the community. There's teachers that can be really, really helpful support. Coaches, counselors. I mean, these are just people to think about. So you want to kind of build a support network around your child so that as they are transitioning, they have that support in place. I think that can be incredibly helpful.
Let's talk about some of the families that we serve. Their kids struggle. They struggle to make friends. They struggle to keep friends. And there's a lot of groups that we join and leave. And what do you do? What do you do when there's that ongoing revolving door, or it's like it's okay, it's easy for them to make that friendship, but they just can't keep it because that's really hard on them emotionally. So do you have any suggestions for parents on that? Because I know we serve a lot of parents that's a real issue for.
Yes, I agree. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues we see. So there's a few things I think that can be helpful. Back to the idea of like acting as a coach, as a parent, I think that's one way that we can be helpful is stepping back, but kind of observing and watching their interactions with their peers and their friends and kind of watching how they handle things. And we can act as a coach by occasionally maybe pulling them aside, giving them some tips and advice, role playing and practicing some things with them at home, because they do need, a lot of our kids need guidance with social situations. They just don't know how to handle it. Especially if things aren't going well, they're not sure how to resolve that. And so they may really need our guidance and our support during that time. But I think another thing you can do is reach out for help, because that's another way that therapists can be helpful is by working on social skills directly, teaching and practicing social skills and helping improve their interactions with their peers so that they can learn to maintain those friendships after making friends, because that is the hard part, is holding on to those friendships. And then I think as parents too, another thing we can do is intentionally support those friendships. So if we see that they have a good, healthy friendship, I don't think it's always helpful for us to just kind of stand back and let it be, because they may not have all the tools they need to maintain that. And so we can support that by planning play dates with that other family, getting to know the parents, making sure they have their contact information and they can communicate with them over time, especially as they're transitioning out of high school, or, you know, they're moving on from one school or one place to another. We can help continue that link, maintain that link. What were you going to say, Allison?
I was just going to say, sometimes it's just buying pizza. It's making your house the okay place for them to hang out and play video games or watch a movie or hang out in the pool or whatever it is that they do. It's making that space comfortable and encouraging them to invite a friend over. And each time that it goes successfully, then they'll be more encouraged to do it again. But I would like you to just talk about the mental health support groups, because I have seen and heard of some teen, like social skills support groups. Like, so maybe you can't get in with a licensed clinical psychologist right now, but sometimes there are some good junior high and high school, sometimes elementary school groups, right? Can you talk about that?
Yes. And you're right. Sometimes that's even what we're offering families right now who we can't get in for individual therapy right away. We automatically, if they're interested, we'll put them on a wait list for our support group. For one of our support groups. And you're right, that's sometimes an option to do that sooner. And I really would encourage you to do that, especially if your kids struggle at all with social skills and social situations, because those kinds of support groups, it's a controlled atmosphere. It's led by a therapist. They're small groups. And they're specifically designed to help them learn and practice some good social skills and practice it with these other kids who are in that group. So it's a safe space to work on that. And we don't have very many opportunities to do that. And so I think that can be we've seen it really be helpful for a lot of kids that we work with. And so we certainly offer it at our clinic for younger kids as well as for teens. And then there are several other locations around town where you can find some similar social skills groups. I think recently we were talking about that. I believe the Prism Center offers some groups, the Solace Center in Siena, I believe they offer some groups. There's several groups around town. And so it's definitely something to consider when you're working on any kind of social difficulty. I'm trying to think if there was,
I want to comment on the groups too, because some of the groups are really, they're really more focused on social skills, and there are other groups out there where, you know, the ante is upped a little bit. So these kids may have some bigger struggles. They may have some self-harm, some suicidal ideation. They may have some drug problems, some other things. So you got to research the programs carefully. I've done a lot of research on this over the years, and I know we have some data on that kind of stuff in some of our lists and things. But research carefully, kind of depending and kind of meeting where your child is, because some of the programs, while they are good, they may have exposure to other problems that you're not having right now, and quite frankly, you don't want. So I think it is careful. Careful consideration is definitely important. But just know that there are a lot of groups around, in and around. Some of them a little bit more informal, like when you were talking about PRISM or some of these other programs. There's some intensive outpatient therapy, partial hospitalization therapy, and those are the ones that I'm talking about being a lot more kind of up the ante, maybe on steroids. Where there are also a lot of these other groups that are more on the social skills side and kind of relational things, for sure.
That's very true. And a lot of the organizations around town that focus on specific diagnoses, like organizations that are that support families on the autism spectrum, for example, they oftentimes will offer groups as well, support groups and fun opportunities for the kids to get together and socialize. And so that's another thing that you can really take advantage of. And many of those are free opportunities. Another thing I wanted to say too about the idea of keeping up social connections is focus on quality rather than quantity. So a lot of parents are worried that, yes, my child has one or two close friends, but that's all. And they're worried more about the quantity. And I can tell you from the research, what we found is that it's the quality of those friendships that makes a bigger difference overall in how supported they feel and in their long-term success. And we were doing another presentation recently, and I was talking about one of the predictors of success was having friends. And it really was, when you look at the research, it was actually one friend, having one close friend, close connection, that you really felt like someone that understands you and supports you. I mean, that makes all the difference. And so if you find that friend, then help to maintain that friendship, help your child maintain that friendship, and focus more on encouraging that as opposed to finding more friends and focusing on the number, because that's not going to be as helpful.
Sure. We do have a question I'd like to run by you. Do you have any thoughts on using neurofeedback to assist with handling anxiety and depression as kiddos get older and closer to transition? And to piggyback that, any other alternatives? You know, we hear a lot of things about that. So do you have any thoughts, suggestions on that?
Yes. I mean, so neurofeedback, there's been a lot of research on this. It is effective. I think the upside is that neurofeedback works, and it absolutely can reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. The downside of it is it can be time and cost intensive. So, and not covered by insurance. So it's one of those trade-offs that it's certainly something that parents can look into. It's something that you can try, but you have to go into it knowing that this is something that also you have to dedicate time, quite a bit of time to, and often quite a bit of money as well. But it does have effectiveness. And I would say, as far as other options go, really, you know, there are very effective types of therapy that are designed to treat anxiety and depression. And one of those is just cognitive behavioral therapy. Many of you may have heard of that term. We call it CBT for short, but it's a type of therapy that just has decades of research. It's extremely effective in treating anxiety and depression. And it's something that now most therapists are trained to use. And so that's certainly a really helpful option for kids who have anxiety and depression symptoms. And then if the symptoms are more severe, then it is oftentimes helpful to consider medication if the symptoms are impacting their life or leading to some safety risks, impacting their functioning in a big way. Then I would recommend contacting a child psychiatrist at that point, just talking about some medication options. But as far as other ideas, I mean, the groups are also, there are many groups that incorporate coping skills and strategies for reducing anxiety and depression. And it also gives the kids the extra support to help with those symptoms. And so groups are another way to address it. So you have some different options, and there's strategies that as parents that you can also be using at home. That website, understood.org, it has a lot of helpful articles and ideas, but there's also some good information just about, there's lots of good books for teens and for young adults that focus on anxiety and depression and ways that they can manage it. So giving them strategies and tools and things that they can be practicing at home. And so that's another thing to look into. And if you need ideas, feel free to email me, and I can always send you, I have lots of handouts and lists and different things that I can share. So I know we don't have too much time, so I'll go through these last few really quickly. So preparing, a big thing that I found is just the anxiety is always high when there's any kind of big transition that's coming. And as parents, we feel anxious and our kids feel anxious about it as well. So one way to reduce our anxiety is to reduce that fear of the unknown. You know, when things are unknown, it's scary. And so any preparation you can do is going to be helpful in reducing anxiety. So research the changes together. Any change that is coming up for your child, research it, look into it, plan ahead with them, visit places ahead of time. I think that can always be really, really helpful, so that the first time they go somewhere I guess, so they have some practice going there, so that you can familiarize them with it, and it becomes less scary. If you have a student who's driving and they're going to need to be driving somewhere new, then make sure to practice those new routes and help them locate landmarks and learn directions. And all of this is just practice, practice, practice is what it's all about. And then I think it make things visual, write things out, write out instructions, write out addresses, write out directions. So make sure that they have the visuals to give them that extra sense of confidence that they can do this. So all this preparation, I think it really reduces anxiety quite a bit. And this is part of the preparation, is just having a safety plan in place. Because we do need to plan for those emergencies that may happen. And again, we're always focused on medical emergencies, and you do need to have a safety plan for that. But I think a lot of parents don't think about having a mental health emergency or safety plan. And I think that's something else, especially now what I'm seeing is that this is something really that all teens need. They need to have a plan in place, and they need to be aware that there are crisis phone numbers they can call, crisis text lines that they can send a text to and get in touch with a trained professional. If they're going to be living somewhere different from you, somewhere separate, know how to locate anything that they need for safety purposes, the police station, make sure they know how to contact the police, make sure that they have the information to contact their counselor, their doctor. And I think it's helpful also to introduce them to a neighbor, make sure you have neighbors' contact information, help them identify, are there some trusted family members or friends that they can make sure they have their phone numbers ready in their phone to contact as soon as they need anything. So it just gives everybody some peace of mind knowing that you have this plan in place. And I think, again, make it visible, have this written down, have it hanging up somewhere, make sure parents have a copy and kids have a copy. It's just more preparation that can be really helpful. And I put this website at the bottom that is a helpful website because they have some documents that you can use. Basically, they have it's called this Teen Care Notebook. They have several pages that give you a framework for how to set up some of these plans. And you can just use certain pages, or you can download the whole Teen Care Notebook and fill out the whole thing. But it just kind of gives you some structure for how to do this.
And just a reminder, everybody's going to get the slides. So it'll have the link in the slides. Just seeing if you didn't get it down.
I know that's a hard link to remember. And then I think it's also something I'm just reminding everyone that it's a good thing to talk about the feelings that are going on through this time of transition, because that's something sometimes we neglect because we're so focused on all these other things and setting things up and preparing, but we kind of neglect how are we actually feeling about this, and actually discussing it openly and talking about it. And because it's hard for everyone. Change is hard, especially for parents of special needs kids. We hold on to them tightly because we've had to for so long, and we've had to be very, very involved, and it's very hard to let go of some of that. So keep in mind that every family member will feel differently and will cope differently with this change. Just like when we're dealing with grief, everyone is going to react differently, and you have to kind of go into it knowing that. And I think it's helpful to actually talk about the feelings and also kind of normalize them. Just let your kids know, or other families know that all of these feelings are normal and all of them are okay. There's going to be excitement, hope, anxiety, fear, grief, loss, all these different feelings. And we need to kind of bring them to the surface and talk through them. There's helpful ways to do that. Obviously, we already talked about counseling, getting a therapist involved, but other ways, just journaling about it, talking as a family, reaching out to friends. I would really encourage you to get connected with other parents who are going through the same thing, who have kids who are similar and who are also transitioning. I think those parents are going to be a huge support for you. And those are people that you can reach out to and talk with about some of these feelings, and they will truly understand how you are feeling. But also just other groups that you might be involved in, religious or community groups, are other ways to process some of those feelings. And then this is kind of the last one. I also wanted to give a reminder to just keep things positive as much as you can, because sometimes we forget that our words are really going to make a big difference for our kids, but they do. Be aware of your words, because I hear the words from the kids. They will come into our therapy sessions and they will say, well, my mom said this, or my dad said this, and it sticks with them. And so when you are communicating anxiety and stress and negativity, or negative expectations, that is contagious. They are going to pick up on that. They are going to internalize that. Because they're looking to you for guidance. So just be aware of those words, be aware that how you perceive this transition is going to be how they perceive it. And so if you are nervous and anxious and stressed, that's okay, but just make sure you seek support elsewhere and try to kind of not involve your teen in that, and make sure you have your own support network to cope with those feelings separately. And then even when they have those little successes along the way, I think we need to celebrate those successes, make a big deal out of it, and try to make sure we're not shifting our focus only on what needs to change and what needs to improve and what we need to work on. But let's also focus on what did they do well, what are some of the positive changes that have happened, because the more we celebrate those, the more confident they are going to feel about the transition. So if you guys can convey optimism and excitement for this transition, then that's how they're going to feel as well. I see this all the time with parents and kids. It just makes a huge difference. So just really be aware of your attitude and your words and how you're communicating. So here is my contact information. Like I said, if you guys need anything, if you have questions, need any resources, feel free to reach out. And I would be happy to talk with you. But that is all I have.
I just want to say that I personally know that Lindsay is chock full of resources. She's kind of a student like me, of like taking it all in and learning what's around here, who's good, who has openings. So I know for a fact that Lindsay's been able to help a lot of families over the years. So certainly reach out for her. We're out of time today. Our contact information is at the end of the slides. We also have a kind of a long list of things that should be on your transition planning radar. And we've got webinars on every single one of those topics. So we hope you'll join us again for one of those topics. And Lindsay, I would just like to say thank you again for joining us today. It's certainly been a pleasure. I love doing webinars with you because they're always so, I think as a parent, it just brings me back to center of who do I want to be, where do I want to be, how do I want to come off with my kids? Because the truth is we all do get tired, and we do get frustrated and things like that. Sometimes as parents, we do say things that maybe we wish we wouldn't have said. But this is so encouraging, and certainly my pleasure to be here with you again today. So thanks everyone for taking your time, spending your lunch with us, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon. Take care.
All right. Bye, everyone.